Hi, everybody. So everybody's in. There, people are coming in now, and
Some
what
people
I've
left.
done. Some people have left already. It's there's things happen. But yeah, we are here. I'm here with Lex Roman and folks that came in. I set the meeting up to where your mic would be muted by default, and that's by design because we're gonna do some Q&A, but it's going to be toward the end of the session. We're gonna reserve 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A toward the end if anybody has any questions they want to dive deeper into. But yeah, for now, I would love to introduce our very special guest, Lex Roman. And Lex Roman she is right now working at Black Tux, and she is leading the growth design initiative over there. And Lex, by the way, I actually was doing my little morning routine. I get on the treadmill in the mornings, and I was watching a TV show on NBC. And what do you know? There's a commercial for Black Tux.
Yeah, we started doing commercials. We have billboard ads in New York and San Francisco. It's pretty cool. It's wedding season, Jason.
Oh, it is. Oh, that makes perfect sense then. It's
Yeah.
smart to do that advertising. And I saw the ad and I was like, I know somebody that works there.
Yeah.
And it was cool. The ad was really well done. I thought it was really pro, and like it was shot really well. I knew exactly what y'all did immediately. So and yeah, I thought that was really cool. It was a neat little delight, a little surprise and delight there. But Lex formerly worked at Envision, and then before that she worked at Burner, and she was also a super guest on episode 45, and that's one of my favorite episodes. And I don't say that to everybody that's on the show, but it was one of my favorite episodes still. And I love the title of it too. It's called "Criticized by Creating." And we had such a fun conversation, and that one got a lot of people were talking a lot about that a lot. And so highly recommend checking that out, Defenders. If you haven't heard it yet, episode 45. After this, don't do it now, but after our time here, you can check it out. Lex is very active in Los Angeles. She's a superhero, folks. She really is a real life superhero. She's not only just so generous in our field and doing things like this, like she's doing today for us. She's a superhero in LA. She's really active in trying to help end the homelessness and helping those folks experiencing it. And I just commend you, Lex, on all your efforts. And you don't have to do that, right? It's like you don't have to, like maybe somebody else will do it, but maybe not enough people aren't doing something about it, and that's why you're so active. And I just commend you on that, and I thank you for doing everything you can in that area. And Lex is a dancer. I say in my bio, I'm human, not dancer, but Lex is human and dancer. Okay.
This is quite an introduction, Jason. You've covered like my whole. Do you have the hospital I was born in too on there?
Yeah, she was born in, no, I don't. But I wanted to make sure I gave a proper introduction, and
Appreciate that.
Fill in the blanks of whatever I may have missed, and go ahead. And I just want to let you take it away now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate that introduction, Jason. And I also enjoyed our episode together. I learned a lot from you, and my mom loves your movie trailer voice that you have. So it's a big favorite in my family, that episode.
Oh,
all right. So I'm going to share my deck. Actually, I think I have to share my whole screen. Hold on. And I'll actually talk a lot more about my work as we get going. I lose my cursor. Hold on, sorry. Zoom does this thing where it hides your cursor. All right. Can y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what growth design is. I'm going to talk about my background and how I got into this work at the beginning, and then we'll spend most of our time focusing on a specific part of the process or techniques around growth design. And this is a really nascent field. So I just want to caveat everything by saying that growth is less than 10 years old as a practice. Like the idea of growth hacking or growth marketing, it's like maybe around 2011 that became a thing. So growth design is extremely nascent and brand new to most organizations. And by most, I mean a handful. So this is very much my perspective and the work that I've developed. And there are other ways to approach the same idea. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about some resources if you're interested in learning more about this practice. So I started my career doing conversion design. And what that meant is that I would have clients come to the agency I worked at here in LA and ask if they could make more money. I'd like more people to sign up. I'd like more people to buy stuff. I'd like more donations. And I started working with those clients to try to improve the design of their sites so they could achieve those goals. And I learned a lot through that process about measuring success and how to really think about design and how it correlates to user behavior or customer behavior. And so I took that and started working in the lean startup space. So this is a photo, that's me in the middle there, of me at a gas station in Mountain View, California, when I was working with the Toyota team, working on lean startup validation for some innovation projects for them. So I went from conversion design sort of backwards into lean startup, which is mostly about product market fit. Do you have a product that is meaningful to a certain segment of the market? Who is that market? Can you match them together and make money? So I did some of that work with Toyota. This is like some of the drawings from that. This is on the innovation side. It's less about measuring success and it's much more about trying to identify that market segment and really understanding your customers. I moved from there back into more conversion work and working with more growth companies. So post product market fit, how do you scale that product market fit? How do you stay defensible in the market and hold your position? And I worked with this company called Prosper, which does peer-to-peer lending and personal loans. And they wanted to increase conversion on their loan platform. How do you get more people to sign up for loans or to apply for loans? So we took a lot of those lean startup techniques and ported them over to more quantitative techniques using things like A/B testing, multivariate testing, to try to validate how we can make this happen. And we ended up focusing on their mobile product and increasing conversion just through the loan application process there. So you'll see here that in both of these things, there's a lot of lo-fi work and a lot of thinking through the scenario that someone is in. That's what's happening here with all these storyboards. And then I went to a company called Burner. I moved in-house. And at Burner, they have a mobile app. They have an iOS app and an Android app, both of which are pretty solid from a retention point of view, but they wanted to grow the customer base. So we spent a lot of time digging into how do we introduce people to Burner? What is that value proposition? How do we match the value prop to the onboarding experience? So what you're looking at here is that initial onboarding experience, 4 different proposals for that onboarding experience. And I'm going to talk more about this, but here I have the user journey mapped. On the top is iOS, on the bottom is Android. I think that's right, maybe the other way around. And then I've mapped the metrics. So how many people do I have at the beginning of this? Those are on the orange Post-its. And then at each step of that customer experience, how many am I losing? So by the end there, when they're in the app, how many have I lost? And then in the green, I'm asking questions like, why might this be happening? What's going on with this metric? And so through all of these companies, I've built up this practice of trying to understand why people are behaving a certain way with a design and how it's impacting the revenue for the business or the success metrics. So if you're working with a nonprofit, it might be less about revenue, but the success of the business, how are we impacting that through our design decision-making? And what I've found is that all designers care about that at a high level, right? They care about business goals. They care about customers. But what I found is that most designers don't actually know how to see that impact on the business. So they know that it exists, but they don't really know. They ship something and they're like, oh, I hope it's doing well. Maybe I'll ask the PM if it's doing well. Rather than really getting in there and saying, oh, it's this one screen that's problematic. It's this one button. It's this one interaction. And now I'm doing that at the Black Tux. This is our discovery board for a project that we did there around checkout. So we focused all of our work on how do we get people who are ready to check out to finish their checkout. And here's like a little sketch from that idea. One of our experiments was to break up checkout into multiple parts. That's now live on our site. So I'm going to start with why you should care about growth and why you should care about growth design. We're going to talk a little bit about my process and specifically about just the part about validating design. I'm going to run you through some techniques. We're going to do a little bit of practice, and then we'll talk about resources. We have quite an ambitious agenda for our hour together today. All right. Why care about growth? There's a few reasons to care about growth. The first reason is we care about design, right? We as designers believe that design is inherently valuable. We believe that it returns money to businesses. And we are constantly looking for ways to prove that, right? How do you know the ROI of design? How do you know that design is valuable? So growth and the ability to measure the success of design is a way that you know that, right? So you can prove the ROI of design. You don't have to just say that it has value. You can prove that it does. So I think what's powerful about growth is equipping designers with the vocabulary and the evidence that their design is actually valuable to the business. Another reason this matters is that designers get paid less than other partners on teams and PMs and engineers, right? And we know for a fact that design is hired less than those roles, right? Most of you probably work on teams with less designers than PMs and software engineers. So part of that is coming from the perceived value of design, right? And still the holdover of the design is just about making UI. And then lastly, for companies that do have growth teams, we see design get left out of that practice. So historically, growth teams have spun up with PMs and engineers and marketers. And then often the designer is like a borrowed resource from another team or doesn't exist. And Casey Winters talks about this on his blog. He is an advisor to Brian Balfour's platform, which is called Growth Reforge. It's like a growth training platform. And now he's the CPO at Eventbrite. But he was talking about this in this article a few years back about how growth teams start, they don't have a designer. And then what happens is that the PMs design and just tell a designer to make mocks, right? So they hire these designers on to just basically make mock-ups. And they're left out of the strategic decisions around growth, around how you design, around what you design, around what's going to make the company money. So all of these reasons I think are reasons to get involved in growth, and particularly for designers to do that. And also there's a lot of jobs coming online. We've been seeing new growth design jobs across the whole world, although definitely in San Francisco and New York, so many companies are hiring growth designers. I'm going to share a list at the end. All right. So let's talk about the process for growth design. I often have this conversation around what's different about designing for growth than designing for products in general. And so I put this handy chart together. And as we know, there's all kinds of designers. There's information architects, there's user researchers, there's visual designers. So to me, growth is like one of those things. It's a focus area that goes alongside a full stack design practice. And what's different about designing for growth than designing for products in general is the radical focus on ROI. So rather than just saying this is good for our users, you're saying this is our business goal. Here's how we deliver value to our users in a way that can execute that business goal, right? So for Black Ducks, it's like we want people to check out. What's missing from the user experience that's causing them not to check out? So it's the focus on that impact, not just the, oh, it would be nice if it did this, or customers complain about this one thing, but is fixing that one thing going to drive revenue is the question. And I think what's interesting about having designers involved in that is that they can approach it from an authentic lens of customer value rather than a hack lens of like, oh, we'll just take their money. Like if we just do this dark pattern, great, we take their money. So what's interesting is merging that mindset of like, oh, we've identified all these pain points. Guess what? Pain points equals loss of revenue. So matching that opportunity is what's interesting about growth. And then I think the other big difference is the mindset of shipping changes. So we're not shipping complete features. We're generally shipping things to learn. We're shipping tests. We're trying to understand, is this the direction we should move in? And I've been talking a lot with growth leaders about this, like what is the difference between growth teams and core product teams, or growth teams and non-growth teams? And the thing that keeps coming back up is this cadence of learning. So like core product teams tend to ship slower than growth teams. Growth teams are shipping in days and week cycles, whereas core product teams can ship like months, right? We've seen people just like drag features out forever. And so if you're spending 2 months on something that you're wrong about, that's a big waste of resources when you could spend 2 days on it or 2 weeks on it and learn if that's worth investing in. And I don't think that anyone has this model down of like, how do the growth team pass off things to the core product team, or how do we best set up this org? I think that's all still pretty nascent. But to me, the important thing is this shift in mindset is like, do you want to drive revenue? Would you like to prove the ROI of design? If so, you need to focus on the joint intersection of user goals and business goals. This is just an example of how that process works. And it might look to you a lot like a regular design process, probably something you're already doing today. I want to highlight just a couple things about this though. So all of you hopefully are working on teams with goals. Sometimes you don't, but generally we have a goal. What makes it possible to do growth design or to do growth at all is to really understand what's going wrong about that goal today. So why aren't people signing up? What's going on in that process? And that's the understand the opportunity part. So like looking at the metrics and really having a nuanced view of what's going wrong there, not just taking a PM's word that like, oh, no one's signing up, or we're losing all these people at this one place, right? Retention's down, or conversion's down is my favorite. Conversion's down. It's like, what's conversion? And really understanding like what's going wrong in there. Are all those things instrumented? Are they instrumented correctly? And in addition to all the data work, talking with customers, reading feedback, talking with customer care, customer support, understanding what might be happening to customers during that area of the product, right? So you cannot underestimate the understanding opportunity part. It is where I would put the bulk of the work. And that's why I have those like ridiculous boards, because it's like a discovery tool. It's like, oh, it looks like people are dropping off here. What could be going on there? Let's talk to people. Let's talk to customer support. Let's talk to customers. Let's look at the analytics. I think designers gloss over that a lot. I think that happens a lot. I think people are like in this mindset of like, let's just make mocks, right? The designer's output is mocks. The growth designer's output is outcomes. So you have to spend a lot of that time really understanding where you should place your focus. And today we're going to talk mostly about how do you approach that design phase, and how do you ship lightly? Because that is, I think, the biggest challenge for designers getting into growth is like the shift from like, oh, this is how it should be, to like, how do we know that this is what it should be? How do we test that and make sure we're right, right? Oh, it makes so much sense to do it this way, but are we right about that? Is it going to make us money? This is a close-up of one of my discovery boards. You can kind of see how you start to like clarify what the opportunity is, right? So in the top left is the percentage drop off during this hypothetical flow. And then I have questions for discovery, like what's going on? What might this person's situation be? Are there errors happening? Could it just be that they can't get through, right? That the app is broken in some way? Is it slow? Are they confused? What questions might they have? And so all of these like discovery points lead you to finding the opportunity. Where can you place your focus, right? So like, where might you place your focus here? Just looking at the metrics alone. Anyone, you guys can unmute and say. No one? Everyone's like, no, I don't know.
Feel free to unmute and engage. Yeah, totally fine.
Does anyone have an idea? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that? I was kind of writing notes while you were kind of explaining that part of the process.
Where would you, so just looking at these metrics, right? So I have a hypothetical flow here, step 1, step 2, step 3. Where would you place your focus?
That's a good question. I'd really have to really look into this.
It's challenging, and it's
Yeah.
challenging, especially in this hypothetical environment that I haven't given you any goal or any context. But I think
Right.
the question is like, what's the goal? If the goal is to reach that last screen,
Mm-hmm.
and then looking at these numbers, 85%, 70%, 43%, what you might also ask is, how many actual users is that affecting, right? So between 70% and 43% could be one user, depending on the size of your platform, or could be tens of thousands. So you look at those two things. My goal is to get them to the end. Oh, it looks like I have 10,000 users dropping off between step 2 and step 3. I'm going to place my focus there. If I can patch that up, if I can take 43% to 53%, then all the people I send through at the top, I gain at the bottom, right? I keep them with me.
What is the percentage? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, I was when I was looking at it, I was actually going to say I was going to say the 43 because I was thinking that you've already taken these folks maybe this far, and it's just that last hurdle that they need to go over. So they're the ones that just need that slight push, as opposed to maybe the 85% you would have to go through. They would need to still go through the next 2 screens.
Yeah, right. And folks that are like farther into your product are generally more motivated and higher intent, so they're easier even to flip on the other side than people who just land on your homepage.
Yeah, I was trying to understand the percentage. What does the percentage represent on these screens?
It's a very big screen. It represents how many users from total users who started this flow are with us. So if 100% of people downloaded my app, 85% hit that first screen, 70 hit the second, and 43 hit the last one. So I've lost 57% of my users by that last screen.
And this is a user flow. This is the normal user flow that. Okay.
Yeah, for this hypothetical app. Yeah. And so that's like, just going back to my, quit. Keynote was unhappy. Going back to my work at Burner, just showing you that flow, like what I'm taking is a myopic view of the work here. So this is just the onboarding flow for Burner. And I'm looking at step by step how you would get through that flow, because generally if people don't do the first step, they're not going to do the third step. It depends on your app and what the flow is, but a lot of flows are linear, right? So onboarding is linear, checkout flows are linear. And so you lose people at the beginning, and then you just keep losing people like every step of the way. You're losing people the whole way. And what you have to look at is, where is the biggest problem and what's happening on that interaction.
So is what you're looking for, that largest percent of folks decrease? Is that what you're looking for? Or are you suggesting really starting at the beginning, because any percentage affects the most amount of people?
It depends. I think generally you are looking for that big opportunity, like especially if you're looking at a flow like this, where I have people at step 1 and then I've lost most of them by step 3. So you're generally looking for that big decrease, right? Like the problem area here, something's happening between 70% and 43%. What's happening there?
Gotcha.
And then you're looking at like the absolute number of people. How many customers is that actually affecting, right? Like conversion fluctuates wildly if you have a small customer base versus a large one.
Gotcha.
And then you're saying, how much money does that make us? Like how much does that get us back if I generate this much here? And that's a question that you can work with your teammates on. But I think what's important on the design side is, like, I find often that PMs will say like, oh, conversion's down, and then they won't give any more insight into that. And the designer is left to guess across like an entire user flow where that opportunity is, rather than being able to look moment to moment at how it's performing and being like, oh, it's just this one screen, or it's just this one interaction. Oh, turns out no one can sign up because the back end is failing. Like, you know, so I think what's important as a growth designer is really pushing on these opportunities and saying, well, is the opportunity on that first screen? We've lost 15% of people. There is an opportunity there, but the biggest opportunity is at the end there. And if I can repair that, I can get us this many more customers a week.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's looking at this, I understand a lot more now. It looks like the biggest dip is happening from step 2 to step 3. And I think you could expect, there's probably benchmarks, right? Like you have benchmark, we expect to lose maybe 10% from screen 1 to screen 2, but wow, we're losing like 30% nearly going to step 3. What's wrong there, right?
Yes.
Is it kind of what the mind frame that you have?
Yes. Yeah. And what's really different about this for anyone who's done lean startup work or worked in startups that are pre-product market fit, what's different and what's beneficial about working for companies that are in their growth phase is that you have that historical data. So you know when that company hit product market fit, how the company was doing, and you can look back at month over month or year over year growth, and you can see whether or not your company is growing. And so what happens for all companies over time is that growth slows down unless they keep up with that innovation. So you can look back and say, oh, last year we were at 70 to 53%. So we're doing worse this year. That redesign of that screen failed us, right? Or something's changed in the market. We have a competitor that's doing that better than us. And look at what you could gain back or where you could even just shift tactics.
I got a quick question, and I'm not kicking off the Q&A part yet. So feel free to answer this at the end if it's going to interrupt the flow of the presentation. But how does a growth designer dig in to this? How does a growth designer find these stats when it seems like nobody else on the team has them?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that I think requires its own training, Jason. We have to do another one on that because
Right.
the answer is it's like getting involved in the analytics specifically, because I think designers are equipped with the customer research side generally. So, I mean, one way is certainly to interview customers. And if for some reason in your org, you're completely cut off from analytics, which I hear from some folks, especially at larger companies, if you're cut off from analytics and it's just an impossible relationship to repair, you can always do a usability test and figure out where you think that opportunity is, right? If someone's like, oh, signups are down or purchases are down, you can just usability test that flow and be like, oh, there's a huge usability problem here, right? Or people are struggling with this. There's a cognitive load here that's causing problems. But I would really encourage people to get involved on the quant side, because that's how you drive revenue, is really understanding how is revenue being measured? How are errors being tracked? How are we thinking about performance? And the way to do that is just to ask questions. So to talk to your PMs, to talk to data analysts if they exist, and try to understand what tools are being used and how things are being tracked. I think there's a ton of fear about that from designers, and I'm working to try to make that more accessible. There are some trainings online too. Different analytics platforms have training. So if you find out what tool your team uses, if it's not something that was built in-house, then you can usually find some resources about how to use that tool, and then just ask for access to it and make a report and run it by someone else and be like, is this report saying what I think it's saying? Or work with your PM on it. I mean, PMs are supposed to be doing this. They just often don't share that level of detail with design. So work with them on it. Be like, oh, well, how many people are clicking that? Oh, you don't know either? Cool. Let's go talk to the data team. I mean, so often everyone's just pretending they know. It's so important though, because you find so much stuff in the nuance there of like, oh, these people are hitting errors. Well, that's why they're not converting. All right. Let's talk about some techniques. So I wanted to just highlight, again, so to your point, Jason, in the understanding opportunities like area, there's a ton of techniques there that I'm not going to cover today around how to use analytics and customer research to do discovery. I decided to focus on the approach to testing and validating your design, because again, I think it's just like the hardest mindset shift for design, is to not ship the like perfect solution to users, but to try to test and learn what makes sense for the business. So I'm going to focus there. So let's talk about some of those techniques. In terms of understanding the opportunity, you can always lean on problem interviews. And a problem interview, it comes from Ash Maurya's book, Running Lean. That's what we're doing here at Toyota. It's focusing not on your product, but on the area of opportunity. And so, especially if you're validating something that is a new product area for your company, you can try to understand if the person that you're targeting has the problem that you're solving, right? So like, we're gonna talk about Spotify later, Jason's favorite app. And Spotify introduced this thing called like car mode or CarPlay, right? So one thing they could have done is interview customers to see like, how often are you playing Spotify in the car? Or like, when was the last time you tried to play music in the car? What was challenging about that? Do you have a place for your phone to sit in the car? Trying to understand, like, is there scenario set up for success where your product can actually fit into it? Because I think a lot of times people think, oh, we should build this cool feature, rather than like, do our customers have this space for this thing in their lives? Like, does it make sense? Is it going to fit in? And this is the lean startup technique. So you can also use this pre-product market fit to just say like, when was the last time you did your laundry outside your house? When was the last time you walked to the bus, right? And try to figure out, does this person even do this thing I think they do? You can also, as you're figuring out what those problems are, validate whether or not those things matter to people, right? So if I was like, oh, how much do you hate doing laundry? You might say, I hate it a lot. But if I had you rank that against other issues in your life, maybe it's at the bottom. So sometimes I think in these qualitative interviews, we focus just too myopically on the problem that we think is the biggest. And so this idea comes from this guy, Anthony Ulwick, to do outcome-based surveys and to look at, okay, so we know that people are driving around listening to music. It sounds like it's a huge pain. Let's figure out what we think could be better about that and have people rank that, right? So like, it's hard to get to my destination. It's hard to get to my destination while I play music. It's hard to play music. It's hard to find music I like while driving, right? Trying to figure out what those things are, those value propositions are for people, and then having them rank the outcomes rather than your UI, for example. Landing pages is another key technique, also from the lean startup space. So famously, Dropbox did this. I think this is their first landing page, where they just said, here's what we want to provide you. Are you interested? Give us your email. So this is just testing interest in the value proposition.
Validating your idea, correct?
Yes. Are people interested in what you're offering here? And you can do the same thing with a new product offering that's not an entirely new company, right? Like you can say, oh, we're Airbnb. We'd like to offer this new thing called experiences. Are you interested? Put your email in here, right? Before building out experiences. And this is the big mindset shift for design, is rather than like, oh, this is what experiences should be, right? It's like, do people want experiences? Let's see the last time they booked a trip. Oh, never. Okay. So probably not those people. Oh, these people book trips. Well, now if we offer them this value prop, will they give us their email address? Yes, no. Right? Oh, maybe that's the wrong value prop. Let's change the language, right? So looking at these like lightweight ways to approach shifting the design. Feature fakes is one of my favorite ones. This is one from The Guardian, where if you click on something in the UI, it doesn't actually exist. It just tells you that it's coming soon. This is a fantastic technique that I just think is underutilized. So that's what Airbnb could have done, right, with experiences, is say, instead of building on experiences, just, oh, it's not ready yet, but give us your email. Because if no one clicks on that thing, no one's going to use the thing, right? A lot of times you like build the whole thing. What?
That's ingenious.
Yeah, I call it a feature fake. Optimizely calls it a painted door technique, but it's like, if you can't get people to take the first step, they're not going to take the 10th step. So don't build the 10th step until you find out that they want the first step. This is something that, like, I don't know if anyone from here on this call worked at Envision, but Envision is notoriously like awful at this. Like they build out entire feature lines rather than seeing like, oh, is anyone like, is anyone going to click on this? Oh, no one even changes to comment mode. Let's not build commenting, right? So like we have to just challenge that a lot more in our design. We just think some of these things are inherently valuable, but it turns out that they're not discoverable. The value prop is wrong. They're in the wrong place. They're just not solving the problem that the person actually has. I talked about usability tests already. You guys know what usability tests are. What's interesting about usability tests in terms of growth is just eliminating that as an issue, right? So if someone's like, oh, our sign up flow sucks, like people are dropping off like crazy, what you want to eliminate there is usability issues and errors in your software. So it's like, oh, they're hitting some crazy error on the back end, or, oh, this copy is confusing. Let's eliminate all those things before we shift that entire sign-up flow. You can also follow up with customers who've provided specific feedback that you're planning to act on. I use this a lot of Burner when we were looking at, we would like sort all of the customer support tickets and be like, oh, we have this huge opportunity here. No one knows how to make a phone call. This is a phone calling app. That's a huge problem. So let's make an advisory committee of these customers. Let's show them the new design. Let's see if they can use it, right? You can also do this with NPS feedback. I generally don't like NPS, but sometimes this feedback can be helpful to follow up on in that way. Just say like, oh, we fixed this thing that you asked us to fix this thing. We fixed it. Did this fix the problem that you were having? A/B tests. I don't even think I put an example of that in here. I think that should be self-evident. Testing one version against another version. And the big challenge here for designers is how much design is enough to design? How much is enough to test? So you constantly have to look at the flow that you're proposing and say, do we really need this last part? Could we just test this first part? What are we trying to learn here? We're trying to learn, are more people going to sign up using this new proposed flow? Can we just build these first two screens? Can we just build this one piece of copy or this one button? Price tests are great for anyone working on e-commerce like I do. Price tests are challenging, but also really valuable. If you work on mobile apps, there's some tools to do that in Android and iOS. And this can also help, like, obviously get revenue up pretty quickly. Like if you can raise the prices of something or offer a deal on something, get more customers buying that thing. Apple released some tools to do like introductory pricing, which is interesting, and a really valuable tool. Blind product tests, also very cool. This is the Pepsi Coke thing. This is like, oh, like, how does this soda taste? What do you think it is, right? So you can take your product and take away all the branding, or you can take a competitor product and take away all the branding and see how it addresses needs, how people are able to get through it, what questions they have, what blockers, and use this as an input into your design. And then my last method here is rollouts, which is just the idea that like, maybe we're wrong about something, and instead of shipping it to everyone, we'll just ship it to some people and see how it does. Right? So like I think people always talk about being in like a bucket on Twitter, Instagram, right? I'm in a test on one of those things. So they're rolling out some feature, right, to a percentage of customers. And you can use specific tools for those. You can also use A/B testing tools to do that. So I put all of those techniques for validating your designs are in this blog post that I wrote, but I'll share the link with you, Jason. And so when you're looking at the opportunity, I'm looking at this thing, this goal that I want to achieve. This is like your toolkit to address that. And so what I want to do is a little exercise around that. And I'm going to send you all a link in the chat. And then when you open it, if you don't have InVision, I'm going to show you what to do. There's a little continuous guest thing on the top right, if you guys can see that. And then you just put in an email address and it'll let you through.
Yeah, and it could be any email address.
Oh yeah, good. Some of you are in here. Yeah, you can make it up. I don't care. I don't work there anymore. All right.
So everybody see the chat area? You see the link that Lex put in there? Everybody, so you just, in the bottom bar, you'll see a chat button and you'll find that link there.
I love everyone's little like cursors. Okay, and then here's like a fun InVision thing if you don't know this. If you click on my avatar, it'll let you follow my view in InVision. So if you click on this, it'll let you follow me. Okay, so.
I'm not going to tell you what email address I put in there.
Okay. Is it my email address?
No, it's Mark Zuckerberg's.
I love it. Okay. So, and if you're having trouble getting in there, just give a holler, or you can also follow along. Hopefully you can see it. So, we're going to just do an exercise as Jason's favorite app, Spotify. We're going to pretend we all work at Spotify. Maybe someone here does. And we're going to think about this goal of increasing number of plays per day. So I'm Spotify. I want people to play music. I want to increase the number of songs that they play every day because it's an indicator of ad revenue or something like that. So we have here this existing flow. Which includes recently played, my heavy rotation. This is like my home view. If I click into one of these playlists, I get to a playlist here, and then I have to click on a song, which pulls up this detailed view. So this is our existing flow, and we're being asked by our CEO, let's say, to increase the number of songs that are played per user per day. So the question is, how might we do that, right? And so, like, magic time machine, we've gone through this design process, and with our cross-functional team, we've come up with this proposal. We're like, this is going to nail it, right? So we're going to do this new flow. It's called Made for You. It includes these tailored mixes and music discovery. We think that that is going to be way more compelling than the last stuff you looked at. And then we're going to autoplay it once you tap on it rather than taking you to the playlist view. So we're cutting a step here in the process. We're surfacing different content. And then we have like something way more visual here. So instead of the album art, we're going to do a video. We're rearranging some of the UI here. So this is our new flow, right? And I'm shortcutting this whole process because the process to get to this UI is much like your existing design process, right? So now we have this proposal. We've looked at the data. We know that the opportunity is right here. When you open the app to playing the app, they're playing the song rather. And this is our design proposal. And so rather than just build this whole thing like we normally would, we're gonna try to validate that this plan is the right plan, that this is gonna actually increase songs played per user per day. So the question I have for you, we're gonna work through really quickly in the next 5-6 minutes, is how might we validate that we're right about this, right? Let's say that engineering is estimating that this screen here is going to take them a month. That's a long time to learn if we're right about this. And some of these other pieces are complicated too, right? There's a lot of content needed, and maybe machine learning and tailoring needed. So how might we learn if this is valuable? Feel free to shout it out and I'll support you.
Feel free to unmute to answer and to engage. I would say, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go, Jason. You get it.
I was just saying, I would probably just try to make a quick prototype of this and get it on a phone and put it in the user's hands, the targeted user's hands, and kind of, but then, now that I'm thinking about it, the challenge would be we're trying to get them to listen to music. So that's going to be really hard to do with just a static prototype. Like you almost have to invest some time in something that actually feels like the real thing. So now I'm starting to go back on that because this is a really kind of one of those cases where you have to really kind of be inside of the experience. Since Spotify already obviously has an app that works, I think they could create some sort of like sandbox version of this that is attached to specific analytics. And then we would take, you would take that particular special URL or whatever, and then go and get that in front of people. And, you could probably do some remote testing with it. I mean, you might have to have a lot of patience. It might not feel natural. I don't know. I'm kind of spitballing here. I don't know a good way to do this exactly. This could be like a long experiment. I mean, if you're, for me, like I put my Spotify playlist on typically when I'm, driving to work, and I only listen for maybe 10 minutes, and then I put on a book or a podcast. So yeah, interesting. I'd love to hear other perspectives on this.
I was thinking kind of along the same lines as you of doing like an A/B test of having some people have it and some people not having the feature. But then I was thinking, Lex, you were saying that, it could take a month to program that. And so I was thinking with A/B tests, you would need to have that. So then I kind of shifted over to the painted door, the fake feature. So to see if just that option on the landing page was there, and then if people clicked on the daily mix, you would see if people were actually clicking that would want to listen to that in the future if it was actually built out. So really, before taking the time to build that, to really see if enough people would actually even want that option as one of the first options that they were given.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Ross with that as well. I think that there are two types of users. I think there are people who, if you show them a static version of this, they can kind of imagine and visualize how it could look, right? And that doesn't take a lot of time versus programming it and coming up with something that we can kind of prototype and play with, right? I think we can do that static test first and see if people get it. And if we don't, let's see what the level of effort is for our programmers to develop something that we can play with quickly to show what it could possibly be. It's kind of my take on it. So there's that one side of saving time, but also that side of level of effort to get something out that realistically portrays what we're trying to do to gain that value to the business.
Yeah. Anyone else have any ideas? These are great ideas, by the way.
Feel free to unmute and engage if you like.
Also, if you think about it from a designer's point of view, there are designers, maybe even growth designers, who can code, right? So why not take that opportunity to develop something if it's within that proper time frame? I remember working with a principal designer who just would prototype something just to show what the possibilities could be, because he can do it quicker than actually making, I think, like static mock-ups, which was pretty amazing. More power to him. But it's if you have that ability, why not use it?
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. These are great ideas and all of them are valid. And so I think the thing that we have to look at is, what's the thing we're trying to learn? We're trying to learn, how do we get people to play more songs per day? So like, for example, thinking about that goal, we're not going to build this because we know that by the time they're here, they've already achieved our goal of playing the song. So this is like an example of a core product initiative, which is necessary to fulfill a value proposition for the customer, but in this case is not going to get us to our goal, right? So there's no reason to build this at all right away, because we can just use our existing play screen. All of these ideas are valuable, and I think the question is, what do we want to learn and how fast can we learn that? So we go through these and say, so if we have a prototype, let's call this a clickable prototype for the sake of clarity. We have a clickable prototype here. We can show it to target users. Yes. What can we learn from that? We can learn their initial reactions to it, right? Initial confusion. We can see if they can complete the task. If they're existing users of ours, we can see how they compare that task to their existing experience on the platform. So we can identify generally usability issues or reactions to content, for example. So that's valuable. It's not going to tell us whether or not they're going to play more songs, but it would reduce confusion that would get in the way of them playing more songs. And same thing with this. So to your point, Jason, about interactive, I think it's like you could try either of these techniques and do that. And either of them would just teach you, like, can they do this thing? Is there something about the interaction that's confusing them, right? Like, is this play button going to confuse them for some reason? Ross, was it you who said these ones? So like definitely an A/B test is going to be like the most reliable way to know that you're on the right track for this. To your point about how long it's going to take, right? I mean, this is something that can take days. This is like days to maybe a week or two. This, given what the developer said about this, is a lot more time consuming. So then we might lean on something like this, the painted door, which is great because then we can see, did they do this? And because we already have other screens on the app, we'll just redirect them to something we already have, right? So we'll just build partially what we're going for here and send them into something we already have. And then even like in the case of Spotify, where all the content's dynamic, we might just give everyone the same content, or we might bucket people into like 7 types of users, indie rock users versus soul users, right? Rather than tailoring the content like we might plan for the future. So we're just constantly thinking about like, how do I know if I'm right about this? What's the lightest way to know if I'm right about this? And we look at our toolkit and we say, a clickable prototype will help, but I'm not that concerned about usability here. So I'm way more concerned about motivation, right? And Jason, you mentioned being in the car, and it's like, yeah, that would be really interesting to surface in a problem interview. Why is Jason playing an audiobook? Why is he leaving Spotify, right? Where's that opportunity? I think this is just the most interesting part of growth design, is challenging yourself to like the lightest way. It's really hard too, because you often design, hopefully not at this fidelity, but you often design a complete flow, and then you're like, oh, I really would like to build this, but I'm just going to build this one part. I know we said we're going into Q&A. I just wanted to mention that from this step where we've now figured out how we might carve this up and learn that we're correct about these assumptions, we would write something like this, a validation plan, with our team, with our cross-functional partners, and write out, what we want to learn. We would detail out how we're going to test it, and think about how we're going to measure it. So we're going to measure clicks on this button. We're going to measure play time, right? Or what they clicked on or what they played. And then I go into a lot of detail about how to instrument all that stuff. I wasn't going to go into that today, but I'll include this template if you're interested. This is definitely not a thing that design does on its own. It's a team effort, but you take these and those become your validation plans, and then you start testing and learning. And that's like the magic of growth, is that those insights. I just want to share a couple resources really quick, and then we can do a couple minutes of Q&A. I wanted to encourage you, especially if you're new to this idea, to either learn how to see the impact of your last release by talking with your cross-functional partners, right? Oh, how did that thing do? How can I see how that thing did? Or to define a validation plan for your next release. So to look at something you're planning on shipping and saying, like, how do we know that this is the right thing? How do we know that this achieved our goals? These are some of the companies that are hiring growth designers right now. If you're interested in getting into this as your primary field, I have a list of jobs up at growthdesigners.co. I also have articles up there if you're interested in more about the techniques, specifically this one article that goes through those validation techniques. And then we have a Facebook group and a Slack group if you're interested in talking with other designers. And that's it. I'm done now.
Yay.
Sorry that it's like so much to cover.
No, not at all. No, this was amazing, and it was the perfect amount of time. And we have 5 minutes for Q&A. I don't mind extending it a couple minutes, Lex, unless you have a hard stop. But let's see how many questions we have. Feel free to unmute your line now, and feel free to ask Lex any questions you may have on growth design. And Ellen said, thank you, Lex, in the chat.
Thank you, Ellen.
Let's I had a question about how this translates to either physical products or real world experiences. Like if your product is an experience, or if it's physical, or there are some things that are similar, or I guess more so things that are different whenever you're working in the physical real world spectrum.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to do this with software than with physical products, because it's a lot easier to track behavior with software than physical products. But I would say I would sort of look at resources for service design, which include all kinds of prototyping and faking techniques, and see how you could match them up. Like, I mean, my company deals with a physical product, and so like there are ways that we can do that, but we tend to lean on more qualitative validation techniques for those things, and a lot of customer interviews. But I always get that question about like, how do you measure success for like experiences, basically like offline experiences? And it's challenging. I think it's worth like really understanding how your executive team is thinking about that. Or if you are the executive team, it's worth thinking about that. Like, how are you going to measure success through, like for Airbnb, right? Or for Lyft, like how are they measuring success of those human interactions that are happening? And a lot of people do that through NPS, which is not great, but you could use similar techniques like that.
What's NPS?
NPS, Net Promoter Score.
Ah,
The like, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend? Like so many companies use that, right? It's just like, or like restaurants will use just like, how did you like your meal or whatever, right? You could use stuff like that. It's not perfect, but it is a signal, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great question, Ross. Great
Yeah.
question. And Lex, you're sort of at the crossroads because you're selling physical products, but you're doing it in a digital medium.
Yeah.
What's that been like?
What's interesting about Black Tux is that the experience is actually the suit that you receive. It's like not at all the website. Like the website is not the product. And your satisfaction with us is rarely tied to the website unless we really screw it up. So it is really interesting because there's only so much of the experience that's within my control. But it requires us to like think a lot more about scenario and a lot less about software. Like way more about like, oh, who's involved in your wedding and like how is this whole ecosystem playing together to create either satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And we do a lot of that through qual or like observational research. We have showrooms, so we'll just like observe in the showroom how people are interacting with the staff or with the people that they brought with them, right? Like for example, I can't see who they're on the website with in analytics, but I can see in the showroom that they brought their mom and their fiance.
That's cool.
Yeah. So then I'm like, oh, I wonder if I should ask about who else is involved in the wedding. Oh, turns out a lot of people are. Right. And then that's complicating the conversion cycle, right? Because like it's not just one person trying to do it. It's a person trying to text their friend. And then that is slowing the whole thing down. So like maybe I should make it easier for them to share with their friend or whatever.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the emotional impact too, because I mean, your wedding day, I mean, I remember my wedding day, I remember going and getting the tux, and that was really arduous. Like, that's why I think with Black Tux, what you all are doing there is you're really solving a big problem, because I remember it was a pain in the butt. But I remember though, like, because I was so excited to get married, it's almost like a lot of women when they give birth, it's like so excruciating. And then there's some sort of weird chemical in the brain that like, maybe a week later they forget the pain and like, oh, I want to do this again because it's so nice having a baby. It's like, it's kind of one of those things. Like, I just like what you're doing is like, this is like a really highly emotional experience. Your wedding day, it's a big deal. So like, I don't know, there's something there. I mean, it's awesome that your company takes this so seriously. Knowing the emotional impact and value of delivering a tux to somebody's house, making it as painless as possible, eliminating pain points. Like you said earlier on, you said pain points equals loss of revenue. And so like that right there is like that's a great example to me of growth and the emphasis on your company.
Yeah, totally. And you have to like prove that though. I think it's true in general, but it's also true that like there are pain points that are like not going to affect your revenue at all, right? Like customers will say like, oh, I wish it was like this. And it's like, but would you pay us more money for that? I don't know. That you don't ask them that, but like you kind of have to assess that. Like, would they?
Yeah.
So, people are so cheap, especially on the internet with software these days, right?
Oh, I know.
It's not free. It's like, yeah, it's because your data.
Yeah. I learned Photoshop because I had access to it early on. Everybody had a Photoshop crack code or whatever, but I mean, it's like I feel really good about all the music I stole in the early 90s and early 2000s. I feel so good that I've been paying, even though I hate Spotify, I feel like I'm kind of making a recompense for all of the music I stole. I've been a customer for like 10 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Practically. I mean, I don't know if they've been around but probably close to now. And, I think that the movement to the cloud, everything to the cloud base has really helped software a lot, for sure, as far as like the revenue side of it. And it's a lot harder to steal software now. And I think there's merit. I mean, I'm glad, it helps jobs, it helps companies, it helps growth. But I was curious, what kind of analytics tool are you all using over there?
Yeah, we use Amplitude. Primarily, yeah, we use Optimizely for A/B testing. And I love Amplitude. I highly recommend it to folks. And sometimes I do trainings on it. But I think the key to all analytics tools is like the events that you put into the system. So it really requires a lot of collaboration with the data team and or engineering to make sure that the information that's going in is clean and understandable. And I do have some resources for that too. And I'm working on doing more like, I've done a couple like designer, like analytics for designers trainings. And so I'm thinking about doing some more of those because there's so many cool tools now for designers to see actual user flows and track that a lot closer, which is fun.
Nice.
And you can recruit out of those tools too. So I use Amplitude for user research too, because I can say like, oh, show me people who added an outfit, but then didn't check out, right? And then I can pull all their, and just message them all and be like, hey, can we talk? And they're
Nice.
like, sure. Yeah, it's great.
That's smart. I like that. Very cool. Does anybody else have any other questions? This is your last chance.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. So you mentioned that the difference between growth design and product design is the value of the ROI. So my question is, what is the level of effort in regards to research and field study within growth design versus product design? Is more effort on the growth designer, since this is the process of testing to determine if we are going in the right direction?
Do you mean like in terms of discovery user research?
Yes. Yep.
I think it depends on how far into an innovation space you're going. So like if you're shifting your entire product line and you're trying to validate that that's the right move, then you're going to do more research than if you're just like trying to optimize one screen or an interaction. So I think it depends. And it also depends around the urgency. Like I think of growth primarily now as like an optimization function rather than as an innovation function, but you could play it either way. And so it depends on your situation. In an optimization function, you're usually trying to move quickly to drive revenue fast. So you would do less user research there. And I balance user research based on how long the development time would take to do a quantitative test. So like in Ross's example with Spotify, it's like, if it's going to take us 2 months to build that test, I'm going to do more qual during that time. I'm not just going to sit and wait for development to finish. And for a discovery project, you need to do a lot more qualitative work. I think growth though is just not going to, I don't know. I think eventually we're going to see like more folks that are focused on those early product validation work that are separate from growth folks. Ellen wrote a message.
Yeah. Ellen said
Future
yes,
trainings.
I would be.
Oh yeah, the metrics. Yeah, I have done that before, and I can do it again.
Nice, and there's a second to that. So yeah, I mean, I would love to have you come back and talk to us about that in the future.
Yeah, super fun. Maybe I'll bring one of the designers from Amplitude. They do great events and trainings too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, awesome. So before we close, I did have one more question, and you mentioned the Running Lean book by Ash
favorite.
Maurya. That's so highly recommended book there. Are there any other books that you recommend for us to check out in learning more about growth and growth design?
Yes. Yeah.
There's probably a lot.
No, there's actually not that many. I think there's
okay.
like two. I have two. One is Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown. And the other is UX Design for Growth. Is it UX? Yeah. Molly Norris Walker's book, which is great. We just did an AMA with her at Growth Designers. She is awesome. And that is the only book I think on growth design. I would read both of those books if you're interested in this space. Yeah.
Nice. I want to throw one in the hat. I just started reading and kind of scrambling for our time to try to ramp up a little bit. I started reading Measure What Matters by John Doerr.
I have that across from me over here.
Nice. He's an early investor in Google. He's probably doing okay now. Advisor. I think he was doing okay before he invested in Google, to be honest. But anyway, he wrote this book, and it's basically how Google adopted these OKRs, which stands for objectives and key results. They adopted this thanks to him, and his leadership from Andy Grove. This guy, John Doerr, worked at Intel.
Intel.
He worked at Intel in the early days, and as we know, that's where the personal computer revolution started, was with these chips that they made. So his boss, Andy Grove, introduced him to OKRs, and it was hugely successful for Intel and meeting their goals. And then he introduced it at Google, and then as we know, Google's doing all right, and they still to this day really preach OKRs and emphasize it's like a requirement for everybody working there. They have to set OKRs. So I've been like kind of learning a lot about that, and it's been a really great read for these types of conversations and this type of learning as well. So highly recommend checking that out as well.
Yeah, I mean, if the goals are the beginning, I just find that a lot of companies don't actually make those goals actionable. They're just like, oh, we want to increase conversion. It's like, well, how are you measuring that? Who's measuring that? How can I look at that?
Yeah, that's an objective. What are the key results? And I think that's what's missing. And also, is it public? That's another thing I'm learning. Is like, yeah, you can set goals, but until they're public and transparent, you don't have the accountability, and you don't have the oversight from maybe a manager or a peer, like say, hey, kind of nudging you, hey, how's it going with that? And that's another kind of thing that gets missed a lot. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a ton, and I'm getting really inspired. And in having you here, Lex, has just been amazing. And this has been awesome. I learned a ton from our time. So thank you so much. And I think I'm speaking for all of the guests here as well, attendees, and we saw some echoed on the chat. So thank you so much for spending this time with us and training us. And this has been amazing. I'd love to have you back in the future. We can talk more about that later. And I want to say, and this is something I just heard on the book. It's a quote from somebody else. He said, "In God we trust, all others must provide data."
Yep. Amen. I love it. Thank you all for coming and spending your morning with us.
Yeah. Follow Lex on Twitter, by the way, too. She's at Collexity. Okay. So highly recommend following her and checking out her work. And she's at the helm of this. And I'm so thankful, because this is really, honestly, like any designer who doesn't jump on learning about business and growth, honestly, we're going to get left behind, folks. We're going to get left behind, because yes, there's a lot of demand for UX designers, but there's a lot of designers just jumping right in that have no idea what this means, that don't understand that they're not just making things pretty. We have to impact business, we have to impact revenue, and we have to continue to bring growth into the limelight in our field. So awesome.
Yeah, so true. It's so true.
So thanks so much. Thanks everybody for being here. The recording will be available afterward. And last but not least, I just want to say, as always, fight on, my friends.